Cop arrests black man in front of his own house for no reason. What happened next will shock you. Watch till the end and share your opinion in the comments section. Let's see what you think about this video. Have you ever wondered what you'd do if someone accused you of something you didn't do? And not just anyone, a cop right in front of your own home? Imagine standing on your front lawn, relaxing after a long day, only to have a police officer suddenly approach, looking at you like you don't belong. How would you feel if, without any explanation, they demanded to see your ID, demanded to know what you were doing outside your own house? This story begins on a quiet suburban street, one where everyone knows their neighbors. But for one man, simply existing in front of his own home was apparently a crime. Let's call him Marcus. Marcus was a respected man in the community, a teacher who dedicated his days to helping young people stay off the streets. But that day, none of that mattered. Why would a police officer stop and question someone just because of their appearance? Is it right? Is it fair? Marcus asked calmly why he was being stopped, why he was being treated like a suspect in front of his home. The officer's response? Silence, then suspicion. Would you stand there and take it? Would you show your ID even if you knew you didn't need to? Marcus thought for a moment about complying. He just wanted to get inside after all. But then he thought of all the young people he taught, all the lessons he'd given them about standing up for their rights. So he did what he thought was right. He questioned the officer. What crime am I suspected of, officer? Why am I being stopped in front of my own house? But rather than answering, the officer grew defensive, his face hardening, his stance becoming aggressive. He insisted Marcus was resisting. But resisting what? Would you be able to keep your cool in that moment? How would you react if the officer's hand suddenly hovered over his radio, threatening backup for no reason? Within moments, Marcus found himself on the ground, his hands pulled behind his back as neighbors gathered around, shocked. People took out their phones, capturing every moment as the officer cuffed Marcus, his knee pressing down against Marcus's back. Marcus could feel the hard concrete scraping against his face, his own blood seeping into the sidewalk. Would you be calm? Or would you be angry? Would you cry out or stay silent, hoping it would all end soon? In that moment, Marcus's heart raced, pounding like a drum in his chest as questions flooded his mind. Would his neighbors speak up? Would they help him? A crowd formed, murmuring, recording. Some neighbors shouted, demanding to know why Marcus was being arrested. But no one dared to step too close. Fear held them back. If you were there, would you step forward? Would you try to help? They watched, horrified, as the officer dragged Marcus to his feet and shoved him into the back of the squad car. The entire event lasted only minutes, but for Marcus, it felt like an eternity. His wrists throbbed in the tight handcuffs, his dignity and sense of safety shattered. The police officer didn't offer any reason for the arrest, just a vague accusation of suspicious behavior. And in that moment, Marcus knew this wasn't just about him. It was about the countless others who had been treated the same way. If you were in that car, what would you be thinking? What would you say if you finally got a chance to speak? In the police station, Marcus was booked, fingerprinted, and left in a holding cell. He sat in silence, his thoughts racing. He was scared. Yes, but he was also angry. This shouldn't have happened. Not to him. Not to anyone. Word of the incident spread quickly, fueled by videos recorded by neighbors. Social media exploded with outrage as the hashtag Justice for Marcus began trending. People from all over the city, the country demanded answers, demanded accountability. Would you speak out? Would you join the call for justice? With the growing public pressure, the police department couldn't ignore the outcry. The officer was placed on leave pending investigation. But for Marcus, that wasn't enough. He wanted justice, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been treated this way. He reached out to civil rights organizations, determined to make his voice heard. Weeks passed, and the community grew more involved. Protests were organized outside the police station, demanding not only that the officer be fired, but that the department implement new policies to prevent profiling. Community leaders gave speeches. People from all walks of life showed up, holding signs, chanting for change. Would you stand in the crowd? Would you join the voices calling for change? It became clear that this was no longer just about Marcus's arrest. It was about the systemic issues that allowed this to happen in the first place. And while Marcus fought his own case in court, he was simultaneously fighting for a better future. Finally, the officer's disciplinary hearing arrived. Community members, media, and civil rights advocates filled the courthouse. Testimonies from neighbors, from civil rights experts, and even from Marcus himself painted a grim picture of the officer's actions that day. The officer's defense argued it was a misunderstanding, an error in judgment. But the court wasn't convinced. In a landmark ruling, the officer was not only dismissed from the force, but faced legal consequences for wrongful arrest and excessive force. The department was also mandated to undergo anti-racism training and implement clear policies against profiling, all while under close oversight. If you were Marcus, would you feel satisfied with this outcome? Would it be enough? For Marcus, it was a victory, but not the end. He knew that the battle against profiling and unjust treatment was far from over. With his newfound platform, he continued advocating for change, speaking out, and encouraging others to share their stories. In the end, Marcus became a symbol of resilience, of justice, and of the power of community. His story ignited conversations, opened eyes, and challenged people to consider. What would you do if this happened to you? And how far would you go to make sure it never happens to anyone else?